Language Conference and Lecture Series, broadcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. And now celebrating the start of our second quarter century, as we always do at the beginning of each program. We thank those who hosted our first quarter century, the Orthodox Union of the United States and its Israel Center, 22 Karen Hayesod Street, who welcomed us in January 1995. We concluded our first quarter century in December 2020, and especially the Educational Director Emeritus and founder and editor emeritus of the remarkable Torah Tidbits publication, Mr. Philip Chernovsky, his Eshet Chayil, woman of valor, Mrs. Tony Chernovsky, and the long-suffering scheduler, Mrs. Itter Rachel Russick, who kept the whole place going like Grand Central Station with trains coming in and out without the system collapsing. I don't know how she did it. I would have been carried out on a stretcher long ago. So thanks to all of you. Because of what you did then, we had a chance to get started our first 25 years and now getting to work on our second 25 years. Today is Sunday, June 20th, 2021 in the Gregorian calendar. And it is the 10th day of Tammuz 5781 in the Hebrew Israelite calendar. As we always do, we give a historical context where we are. On May 16, 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising against the Nazis came to an end. June 5, 1967 was the beginning of the miraculous Six-Day War. June 6, 1944, Allied armies from primarily England, Canada, and the United States landed at various beaches in Normandy to begin the liberation of France. And it's because of them that we can be here today, and so many others. So we remember them. We are broadcasting from the land of Israel, city of God, Jerusalem, hill of the priests, Givat Hanania Abu Tor, overlooking Mount Moriah, where the third and final Israelite temple of Jerusalem, we believe, will soon be under reconstruction and stand forever, as per the prophet Ezekiel's vision. Please see the biblical book of Ezekiel, chapters 40 through 48. The Root and Branch Association promotes faith in the God of Israel, who created us all, for the nations to honor and observe God's Noahide covenant and laws. Please see Genesis chapter 9. If you are a Christian, please see the book of Acts chapter 15. And for all to honor God's land, Torah, and people covenants with his chosen people, Israel. That's all 12 tribes of us. Our speaker for this evening's program is the remarkable Mr. David Bedein, who will be speaking on taking initiative when the government does not function. Ask for what Israel can do for you. Ask not what Israel can do for you. Ask what you can do for Israel. At David's request, this is the Saul David Alinsky Memorial Lecture. And I want to also say that we are doing now all the programs in honor and memory of Lieutenant Colonel Martin Gallen, Esquire, NYU Law Review 1949, ROTC in the 1930s at City College, entered the United States Army in the European theater as a lieutenant in 1942, left as a captain, joined the United States Army Reserves, and was retired as lieutenant colonel. And on October 16, 2018, at the age of 98 years young, was buried with full military honors by a United States Army Honor Guard in Westchester, New York. He is here with us in spirit now. I also like to say that, in my opinion, we are now on day 99 of the second year of the regenerating fifth Israelite monarchy of Daniel's vision. Please see the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verse 44, which this ancient Israelite artist believes began on Rosh Chodesh 5780, 14 months ago. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Les Glassman. That's a dentist. If you need a crown or a root canal, come to Jerusalem and see Les. He is going to introduce our remarkably talented speaker. And now, Les, please, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Lau. And it really is an honor and a privilege to introduce a very dear, and I've known David for many, many years, and it really is always such an honor and a privilege to hear you speak and to hear the words of wisdom. But I'm just going to give a a brief CV because anyone can go on to Google your name and you'll see your achievements. We could spend literally hours discussing what you've done and what you've achieved. But I think the most important thing is that you are a MSW, which is Must Save the World. And but it's true is you actually are a master in social work that you got from Yeshiva University. And you're a community organizer by profession, a writer, investigative journalist, amongst many other things. In '87, you established Israel Resource News Agency with offices in the Beit Agnon International Press Center in Jerusalem. And you serve as the director of the Center of Near East Policy Research. You've also reported for many news outlets and many publications, including CNN Radio, Makor Rishon, Philadelphia Inquirer, the Jerusalem Post, the Jewish World Review, and for 4 years, you were the Middle East correspondent for the Bulletin, and you wrote over 1,000 articles until the newspaper ceased operation in 2010. You've covered attempts at Middle East negotiations centering on Israel in many major cities in the world. You live in Efrat with your family, and one of your inspirations is the community organizer and activist. Now, I just want to continue a little bit because, David, what you have done in the past and what, please God, you'll continue in the future is so important. What's very interesting, and I think this is actually quite amazing, is that you were very active in the peace movement for 17 years. And I think somebody who comes from that perspective, who really isn't coming like from your house, you've actually been there and you've seen the reality on the ground. But in 1980, you went to Ethiopia as part of a delegation to investigate the impact of the famine in Ethiopia on the Jewish community. And I think this had a tremendous impact on the successful and the most amazing airlift of Ethiopian Jews coming to Israel and becoming part of Israeli society, which is a tremendous feat that the Israeli government did and continues to do in the absorption of our brethren from Ethiopia. But most recently, you developed many organizations, B'Tselem Watch, which is so important, and other websites that introduce criticism to human rights groups, where so often they're not right and they're very anti-human rights. Anyway, your UNRWA Reform Initiative was launched by the Center for Near East Policy Research, and you've conducted news investigations, producing films since 1987. And I think these films are really, really, really important. One of the films you actually showed when John Kerry was Secretary of State, together with Netanyahu, parts of the film was shown. And you've had a tremendous impact on many governments all over the world, the British government, the American government, and where you actually, in the language, in Arabic, people speak what's really happening on the ground. And I think this makes you very unique. And you're in an incredible situation, is that you are coming from a perspective that you have soldiers on the ground. You are there. You're actually watching it. We have people that are, are part of what's happening. And you interview people that are in Gaza. And one of your major achievements as well is you exposed what was happening in the textbooks in the Palestinian Authority, which many governments supported and didn't even realize, because it was in Arabic, what they were writing. And I think you've had a tremendous impact to expose the tremendous anti-Semitism and hatred that are in those textbooks that are being taught to the young children, that's going to have a tremendous impact for their future. So without any further ado, David, we want to welcome you this evening, and we, in eager anticipation, look forward to your presentation. So thank you so much for your valuable time, and we look forward to your insights, and we are so honored to have you this evening.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. And 30 minutes ago, I got off the phone with our crew in Gaza, and they've been filming for the past week the preparations for a weapons training summer camp. Now, what's important, there are many, many groups that we've more or less started a cottage industry, you might say, of looking at Palestinian Authority school books, which are used by UNRWA. And there's at least 4 groups that are looking at that now. but we're the only ones that go and film the children as they learn from the books, because many people can say, oh, it's the books, they're on the shelves. So we got the books initially in 2000, when that was supposed to be for people who are younger than yours truly. In the 1970s and 80s, what was said was the panacea of the peace process, of any peace process, would be when the Palestinian Arabs would produce their own school books. And again, with the Oslo process, that they kept talking about that. And at one point I met Arafat, Rabbi Menachem Fruman, may he rest in peace, made sure I got to meet him because I hired a crew to go around seeing what he says in Arabic. And he received me in a gentlemanly way, if you can say that about such a scoundrel. And I asked him, I was in the presence of other people from Gush Etzion, and I said, Mr. Arafat, when are you going to start speaking words of peace in Arabic? He says, you must see my school books. So I asked him, can you make that arrangement? Now, I learned it from my work in social work, is that when you speak in a respectful manner, even to someone of such a low standing, they'll usually cooperate, and he did. And he made the school books available to yours truly, to my staff, and we have. And that's a long time ago. That was we were the first agency to get a hold of the school books, and Shimon Peres, who was the foreign minister of Israel and also the prime minister, and the president, he assured everyone to his dying day that the school books were school books of peace, except they were school books of peace, except the ones promoting peace were not allowed to be shown. So to this day, the Paris Center for Peace, even though Paris right now has an unlisted number, continues to publicize the idea that there is a school, and every nation in the world thinks, thanks to the Paris Center, that there is a peace curriculum. You can't blame the foreign nations for listening to a man who was cast as one of the renowned presidents of Israel, but that's the case. And we have now we hired Dr. Arnon Gross, who holds a doctorate in Middle Eastern Studies from Princeton University, and a team to go through all 1,000 books that have been issued since August 1st, 2000. And what we've come up with is amazing. You can see their school books at israelbehindthenews.com. And you can also see there how you just press a button there, how you can donate to our work, because we're only supported by private interests. Anyway, to make a long story short, what my friend Les has mentioned is that we gain credibility because we film the schools. And we're now filming their summer camp, where the children of UNRWA are being taught to use live weapons. Hamas organizes the camp in cooperation with UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which you may or may not know, holds 5 million Palestinian Arabs by duress in 59 refugee camps, where they're sitting there since 1949, and their theme is right of return by force of arms. And not one nation has asked for a reform. President Trump, after he saw the books, and by coincidence, I had met President Trump's advance person before he became president, and that advance person provided the books to President Trump. We then, at the advice of David Makovsky, a good friend who works at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, he suggested I made sure that the GAO, the Government Accounting Office, look at what we had, because the U.S. State Department had publicized that the UNRWA was teaching a curriculum for peace. Well, we presented the actual curriculum for the U.S. Congress on 8 different occasions, and in 2016, after we presented it, we went to the GAO because Vice President Biden issued a statement that the school books they teach are for peace, and Senator James Risch, the chairman of the at that time the Middle East Subcommittee of the Senate, commissioned the GAO report, and the Government Accounting Office found that yours truly and our staff were speaking the truth, while the State Department and just about every Jewish organization were lying, as if there was a peace curriculum. Now, as a social work professional, I don't take it personally. They were taught that, and that's the way it is. And perhaps the most shocking and the clear message is conveyed by what the Palestinian children say in their own language while they're going through their education system. I once asked Robert Wistrich, one of the experts on Nazi Germany and also Nazi education. He passed away a few years ago, much too young. And I asked him to compare the school books to the Nazi school books. He says, there's no comparison. The Nazis never, ever promoted the concept of murdering the Jews. Yes, they did demonize. just like the Palestinian Authority school books do, which are being used by UNRWA, but never, ever did they teach what you're about to see now. So I'm going to take a 3-minute clip right now from one of the 24 films we have produced, which you can see on our website, IsraelBehindTheNews.com. And we even have a second website where we can coordinate, where we consolidate all of our work on UNRWA, and called UNRWA-monitor.com. And we're translating the material now into German, and we're making a presentation in the Bundestag in Germany on Wednesday, because Germany is now the big, after the United States pulled out, thanks to President Trump's initiative, the Germans became the biggest funder of UNRWA. So let's take a look at what their summer camp looks like. And it's a Hamas summer camp organized for the children of UNRWA. Okay, you've seen now an example of what these camps look like. Now, I want to say that we want to give everyone who funds these operations the opportunity to do it differently. So what we did was our agency, the Center for Near East Policy Research, recently renamed from my brother, now called the Bedein Center for Near East Policy Research. We reached out to all of the ambassadors of the 67 nations that fund UNRWA, and you can see that list on my site. And every single one of them said we know that UNRWA is making rigorous system of oversight. Now, we've been recently had a victory, which this is basically the first audience I'm talking to, which will learn about the victory we've had with the United States Congress. President Biden 3 months ago asked for the renewal of UNRWA, of funds for UNRWA. And we went to the US Congress through Zoom and got to 80 members of Congress from mostly from the Democratic Party, to their staffers, presented the entire curriculum. And unfortunately, they saw what was in, that's not what was told them. And now they petitioned President Biden, based on our work, to make sure that there be supervision and elimination of any of the school books and any of the incitement which has been seen. So what we're trying to do here is to introduce a whole system where which has been accepted by Congress, which is really wonderful. And that list there, right? Okay, let's look at what are the issues that we're facing here. Okay, all right. Now let's look at our over here, number 2. Okay, yeah. We have suggested to the U.S. Congress and to everyone following this program now there's 6 very reasonable challenges, policy challenges that can be implemented tomorrow morning in order to ameliorate the situation with UNRWA. Now, basically, most people, first of all, UNRWA is spread in several Arab countries, in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem, and Gaza. And the recent Gaza, whatever you want to call it, flare up, whatever it is, 82% of the people in Gaza live in 11 refugee camps, and they're seething. They're seething because they are being told that the communities next to them in the Western Negev are thriving while they are, of course, suffering. So the whole curriculum, and this is number 1, is based on the UNRWA curriculum, which incorporates principles of jihad, martyrdom, and a right of return by force of arms. Don't believe me, take a look at the curriculum. It's right there as we show it. And we also ask for a cessation of paramilitary training in all UNRWA schools. Now, what we got from all the donor countries is it doesn't exist. That's why we raise money to film these kids going through military training. Number 3, one of the most important revelations of our agency was that UNRWA, that the Hamas Workers Union and Teachers Union, the UNRWA Workers, Teachers Union, and Workers Union are dominated by employees of Hamas, people who are associated with Hamas. Every 3 years they have an election, and in 2009 we were lucky enough to get the European Parliament to fund our coverage of those elections, and every 3 years since we cover those elections, and 90% of the vote comes for the UNRWA slate, the Hamas slate for UNRWA, both in the School Teachers Association and in the Workers Association. Now, what's very important for people listening to this program, watching this program, to understand is that violates not any law, but your law. All Western nations that support UNRWA have very clear guidelines that they're not allowed to support UNRWA if the funds are going to terrorists, if the funds are going to certainly to Hamas. Now, it was no surprise to us, because in 2017 that the military tunnels, terror tunnels, we'll call it that, were constructed underneath the UNRWA facilities in Gaza. And we're not rocket scientists. We hired a team of journalists to follow what's going on, following the military battle that took place in 2014, known in Hebrew as Tzuk Eitan. And after that, we were watching a slew of concrete and cement coming through, and we complained about it to all the donor countries, and we were ignored by everybody. And what we just had last month in May 2021 was a massive attack from underground tunnels onto all of Israel. And that these were built with you can't say they couldn't hear it, but UNRWA schools all of a sudden discovered last week and acknowledged last week that they know that the tunnels were coming from under UNRWA. Where are the donor nations? Where are the citizens of the donor nations? That's one of the questions we ask right now. You know, it's like in the book of Breshit, Genesis, Ayeka, where are you? Where are the people who support this stuff? Now, UNRWA has also a youth ambassador, Muhammad Asaf. Again, we don't have time to show all of our films tonight, but one of our films is of Muhammad Asaf, a singer who sings songs about murdering Jews. And he was hired by UNRWA to be their official youth ambassador. Is that appropriate? See, that's what they teach us in social work, to ask questions like, is it appropriate? Now, we asked for a full audit of donor funds that flow to UNRWA. Now, one of the reasons for that is that the documented reports of wasted resources, duplicity of services, and cash flow to Gaza-based terror groups, which gain control over UNRWA operations over the past 18 years. Now, in addition, I can also mention that the issue of organized crime is right there. In other words, the fact that so much money comes in cash. I mean, Turkey gave an interview to our staff interviewer, and so was very, very proud of the fact that they gave him $10 million in cash. Well, cash can go to terrorism, and it can also go to many aspects of organized crime, such as prostitution, narcotics, cars, and weapons. And no one polices it, nobody. And the last issue, last but not least, is the issue of UNRWA. You apply UNHCR standards to UNRWA. Now, UNHCR, that's the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, which are all around the world. Refugees are resettled, but not here. And now, what I could mention to people who would, we can't do all this ourselves. And first of all, of course, we need money to do the work that we do, and we welcome donations. And again, I showed you how to get onto our donation. I'll ask Les to take the donation button off of the website of our Israel BI, that is our website, and show it at the end of the program. But more important to me is if any of you would like to volunteer for us and help us with this. We need liaisons to the donor nations. We need liaisons to the media. We need people who are able to do hands-on research. One of the more important things going on is the fact that there are so many international and Israel-based corporations that do business with UNRWA, and we'd like to know what happens to the prophets. That Israel is supposed to be a land of a nation of prophets with a PH, not with an F. So let's go back to let me stop for a moment and ask the distinguished panel who are watching this program if you have any questions so far.
David, I'd like to mention something. It's actually quite incredible, but if you look at the Jewish Chronicle today, the Jewish Chronicle breaking news is there's an outcry over the UK funding for Palestinian school books that incite terrorism. This is on the Jewish Chronicle website. Fresh calls for the British government to act in the wake of damning EU report on the Palestinian Authority curriculum. And this is amazing. This is exactly what you're speaking about. The publication of a damning European Union report on Palestinian school textbooks confirming that they incite violence against Israel and promote anti-Semitism has prompted renewal calls for the UK to stop funding the teachers who produce the material. So, David, this is from your work. It's incredible. And this is on today. Anybody can go into the JC, the Jewish Chronicle website, and it appears on the front page.
There's one thing, excuse me for a moment, there's one thing that was inaccurate in that report. This was not a European Union report. This is the Erhard Institute in Germany.
They do mention that. They mention it further down.
Exactly.
This is, they do mention it.
It was not an EU report.
In the review. So, David, they say in the review undertaken by George Eckert Institute for International Textbook Research was completed in February 2021, but has just been published following growing pressure for its public release. It details extensive examples of radical material from 156 textbooks and 16 teacher guides used between 2017 and 2019.
Exactly. Now, what I want to say here is...
Yeah, it's amazing, David.
What I want to say here, I'm sorry to disrupt, is that, okay, we went through 1,000 textbooks, not 156. And we can attest to the fact that they're worse than ever before. And we've contacted every donor nation, to which all of them said, we're waiting for the Eckart report, which will attest to the fact that there's a peace education system. That's what's important. Now, what I suggest that I'm trying to form a core group in each donor nation to challenge the government. Now, we've succeeded with the United States in the last few weeks with key people in the Democratic side of the aisle there, who looked at the school books, and not only looked at the school books, but we also showed these films on Capitol Hill through Zoom. Last year, 2 years ago, we did it, of course, in person, and they were impressed in terms of what they're seeing. And there's a couple of organizations dealing with school books only. The issue is not only school books. The issue is an entire culture of the Palestine Liberation Organization. People forget that the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, remains the inspiration of this curriculum. Now, this curriculum, which is, of course, administered by UNRWA through the Palestinian Authority through UNRWA, but it's still, the problem is the PLO. And nobody, except for our agency, has put out material to show that Hamas, which is supposed to be out there out in left field, not even existing, that they're the ones administering the system. And another very important issue to mention is that UNRWA makes a priority of hiring teachers who served long prison sentences for murder of Jews, and that becomes the role model that the Arab children learn from. Now, the concept of attacking schools, and we were very viciously attacked by someone in the Canadian government recently who said, oh, you have to preserve their right to learn. And we say, excuse me, the right to learn what? And we're getting a lot of flack on that, but that's never bothered, as people who know me, that doesn't bother us one iota. This concept, and it could be, and it's going to happen in the near future, that Israel will decide that the schools need to be padlocked, because it's the schools is where the problem is coming from. Now, we're seeing right now, and again, no one is stopping. UNRWA had the opportunity to prevent the registration of children for the weapons training program. Many people warned them of this happening, and they did not do so. It's as if we're watching a Hollywood script being written and then played for a live audience called the world media. Because what they're doing right now, as we speak, is putting 15,000 children through weapons training from age 9. And it seems to me, with malice aforethought, to make sure that hundreds, if not thousands of them will be killed in the next round of fighting. And of course, who will be blamed? You don't have to make it be a rocket science to understand who's going to be blamed. Now, this can be stopped if everyone watching this program tomorrow morning, Monday morning, you're in touch with your appropriate government and their representatives at the United Nations to ask. And remember, the United Nations, people don't know this. The United Nations has nothing to do with UNRWA. I repeat, the United Nations has nothing to do with UNRWA, even though it's a United Nations agency. This sounds like Mad Magazine, right? Right. Because we have sat, our agency, with our full staff of seven people, workers, we've sat with the United Nations Secretary General's office, who explained to us UNRWA operates independently of the UN and do whatever they want. The only ones who oversee UNRWA are the donor nations, beginning with Germany, Sweden, the UK, France, Italy, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Canada. And these are the leading nations, and Australia. These are the leading nations. Where are their people? Most of them are sleeping because they're depending on someone to come out in some knight in shining armor to stop this. And the way in which you stop things, and this is yours truly speaking as a community organizer, is by the grassroots. 5 or 10 people who make this into an issue. I had one of my mentors, a man named Eliezer Jaffe, a wonderful social work professor. He came up with an idea. May he rest in peace, by the way, Eliezer Jaffe. A problem is a problem when someone makes it into a problem. Give me 5 people from each donor nation to form a solid task force for UNRWA reform, and you see exactly what the issues are. From the I'll ask my colleague Les to flash it on the screen again. The 6 policy challenges. Look at them, please, and you'll see exactly what needs to be done. It's not complicated. It's not a rocket science, because there's no one overseeing the education system. Nobody's overseeing the money coming through. No one's overseeing any aspect of UNRWA and they're just dependent on on the goodwill of the people of UNRWA. Well, there is no goodwill there. And what you just saw in the 3-minute clip of our 24 films, you see exactly what's going on. And now is the time to stop what's going on. We have to save children's lives and save Israeli lives. Because
David,
yes, go ahead.
I'm going to give to Yeshua, but I just want to mention something before I give over to Yeshua. Don't you think there's a major problem that we have the head of UNRWA and his deputy? The head was Matthias Schmali and his deputy David DeBolt. They were actually made person non grata because they gave an interview where they said that the Israeli military were a little precise in their, and the Hamas were like offended by the statements, and they banished them from the Gaza Strip.
They were not the heads of UNRWA. That was misreported. They were simply bureaucrats who work for UNRWA. I happen to know both of them personally. They are low-level bureaucrats who were booted out.
But look how difficult it is if you say one word against the Hamas that they now person non grata after so people might be a little bit they might be a little bit afraid, or they might be very apprehensive in even if two like UNRWA workers or whatever.
I'm not talking about speaking. I'm talking about taking action. Taking action. Cutting the money until they stop the curriculum. Cutting the money until they allow for checking out where the money is going to, until there's a proper audit. I'm talking about taking action. Forget about talking. Forget about criticism. Forget about these namby-bamby ways of doing things. Do action here. And you have to demand that the munitions training course, which begins on July 8th, not happen. Not happen. It can only happen with UNRWA cooperation and with the cooperation of the donor countries. Now, the full list of the donor countries on our website. On Wednesday, we're going to be making a presentation for the German Bundestag. If any of you out there speak German or would like to start to challenge what Germany is doing as the lead donor, there's 6 million reasons why you got to follow up with Germany and not have any hesitation to call a spade a spade.
You're sure if you can, you speak German, if you can help, but let's see what you have to say.
I don't speak German, but I think David talked about the tactics of Saul Alinsky about one of the ways that the left has always operated, and the way that the terror organizations have always worked is, you got a talking arm and you've got a fighting arm. And it seems to me that we can talk and we can organize, but a weapons training course is a terror base and should be a military objective, and we should be talking to the Knesset and the government, saying that whenever there is a reprisal again, whenever there's an opportunity to just to attack these guys, I don't care if they're teenage, if they're carrying guns and being trained to commit murder against Israelis, they should be a military target.
That's an absolute point, Yoshua. Do you see the screen I've just put up here? Proposed U.S. government legislation?
Yes.
Okay, you see it now.
Interdicting money. What can be done to interdict the money that's paid out in cash and attack the fine squeeze points where they can be attacked?
Look at these points that the Biden administration has just suggested, and compare it to the policy guidelines that I've just shown you, and it's as if Biden became Bedein or Bedein became Biden, okay? Look at this. This is a major policy change from the United States government. Even President Trump, who took such great action against UNRWA, he did not suggest an overhaul of UNRWA, which is what we need. And now take a look at it right now. These are very interesting. Number 4, in compliance with the conditions of Section 301C of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 to ensure performance of these conditions.
Well, don't you think that they write that stuff down because they have no, like Stalin's constitution, that they have no intention to implement them?
No. This is the when I want to be cynical, I'll be cynical. This is policy. This is policy. This is not simply something to wait. And we just had Flag Day in America. This is not a flag thing, because when you see number 5, read number 5. And we need people who are American citizens to make sure this gets passed, taking steps to ensure the content of all educational materials currently taught in owner-administered schools and summer camps is consistent with the values of human rights, dignity, and tolerance, and does not induce incitement. Now, Habibi, this is the real stuff. It's what we say in French, the mamalosh. It's exactly what needs to be done. What we need are a few people to get out of the bleachers and to go and out of the grandstands and get into the dugout and start fighting. These are the issues to make. What we've always learned. It will just depend. Everyone's going to be taken care of. It's not going to be taken care of. A problem is a problem when someone makes it into a problem. What you can see by seeing any of our 24 films, you'll see exactly what's going on in terms of preparing the children for murder. By the way, it's not hate education. Not hate education. You want to see hate education? There's plenty to show around the world. But here, it's kill education, murder education. If you've ever seen the films of Hitler Jugend, the Nazi youth at the end of the war, produced by William Shirer, shared with the world by William Shirer, who wrote the book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, I recommend you go onto it. You'll see the children at the end of World War II were not showing any emotion. These are their faces are stone faces. That's exactly what we're seeing here. When we film the schools, we still film the summer camps, we film the training, we do not see hatred of Jews. That's the good news. The bad news is we see children trained to murder. And I would like, if let me tell you something. If 10 people, that's what school it would take, 10 people would stand outside the German consulate in New York, or in Washington, or in Jerusalem, or Berlin, 6 million was enough, wasn't it? In Germany, you have to say you are responsible. What we need are for a few people to stand up and be counted. No more namby-mamby stuff here. When we say never again, we mean it. We have to say we mean it. And you'll meet the Germans are not. By the way, when a columnist from Makor Rishon, the newspaper that I once had a column in, it was just a little bit too popular, and so I still write there occasionally. But a columnist from Makor Rishon interviewed the head of the German ambassador, and we translated the school books into German. It's on our website, onra-monitor.com. There's a German section, and we translated the school books into German. What was her response? I don't have time to read them. Well, there's a few very nasty words that I could use, but we don't want to be censored by YouTube, so I won't use them concerning this young lady. But I do say it's what we call in French chutzpah. All right. Any other questions that anyone may have?
Yes. This is an eye opener, and I appreciate it very much. In effect, you are afflicting the comfortable, and you're asking the comfortable to be. You demand the comfortable to be afflicted with this this atrocious UN prefix titled UNRWA, and also the connection of the inclination of funding humanitarian aid to Hamas that is coming, but we must insist on also a very strict oversight of those funds. In the past, as you know, they have been siphoned off to nefarious ends. I'm also, that's one observation. Another is, I'm really astounded that Germany should be in the forefront of such largesse to UNRWA. I think that it behooves it to be more perceptive and more inquisitive as to the ends of UNRWA, and we can understand the Scandinavians, maybe Sweden foremost, being a little bit less inclined or more disinclined to be strict on the funding, but Germany should not be among those. Other things, I am rather optimistic that Biden, in his news conference a few weeks ago, stated very plainly that we will not have peace, including the cessation of military exercises for youth. I include that, unless and until the neighborhood where Israel is living accepts Israel as a fact, a Jewish fact to reckon with. You know, it's part of the gestalt of the psychology, the right to learn. Of course, they have the right to learn, but does that mean that they should be taught to hate and fear and castigate the Jews? It is, I think, very nice that a couple of days ago I saw in the I-24 news the first student from the UAE enrolled in Israel, and they made a big deal about that. That is the kind of coming, I think, belatedly, but coming change that could make even Hamas down the road a little bit more receptive to Israel. It's so sad. And finally, about Lowell's observation about the dates in June, you know, including in those new books that are yet to be written for the PLO and the PA, would be whole chapters on the June 1 and June 2 anniversary in 1941 of the Farhud in Iraq, for example. Maybe the nefarious subterranean attempt by Saddam Hussein in 1981 to have a nuclear reactor, and how that was bombed on June 7, 1981. And in general, to demilitarize that whole region, especially the Hamas. I want to also tip my yarmulke to Saul Alinsky. It's nice that you are affiliated with him. I did not know Saul Alinsky, but I observed his many good things in Chicago, and he has influenced the 44th president of the United States a lot, I think, and it was all to welcome. And finally, I met a few times with Antonio Guterres in New York in the Park East Synagogue. And we had a little chat, and he just got confirmed for another 5-year term. I think that news, and he has spoken in my presence. I was there hearing him very movingly talk about anti-Semitism and how this, the demonization of Israel must cease. And it would be nice to put a little pressure on him to act on this. I don't know to what extent he is able to influence UNRWA's acts, but that is something that must be done. Thank you very much. By the way, also I mentioned it was the Osirik nuclear facility that June 7, 1981, that was bombed.
I'll just share with you, our agency on 6 occasions met with the staff of Guterres, and the staff has mentioned to us on the record, on behalf of the UN Secretary General, that they hope to influence the donor countries. They're not going to they're not going to influence the donor nation, the UN UNRWA itself. They're not going to influence the United Nations stand with Israel. But I just hope that you can write to Mr. Guterres, and the more people write to him, the better, to encourage him, to encourage donor nations. And when we met with him in the beginning of February by Zoom, And we asked Mr. Guterres to please denounce the anti-Semitism of UNRWA. Well, he hasn't done that in the last 4 months. So please make sure that your words are heard in his presence, because he will listen to it, especially since he met you. I can just say that I can just say to people right now, we need backing, and we need backing to film the UNRWA training camps, military training camps, because no one believes it. Well, seeing is believing. So there's a donate button, which you'll see on our website. I'm showing it on the screen here, and there's a by credit card, and or by we have a agency in California that has adopted us in a very, very nice way. We have to be able to do what we're doing. There's too many people who do not want us to succeed, and that includes the people who do business in Gaza. Israel, we're supposed to be a nation of prophets, Prophets, not Profits. So those making profits from Gaza, we're sorry, but we have no respect for you.
Thank you.
There was a certain very famous or infamous personality who promoted the concept of the new Middle East, where we won't have to have borders, we won't have to have guns, and this is the opposite. When you don't have guns and the other side does, you tell me what the implications are. Again, we must film it. The expression we'd like to use is "let my people know." Are there any other questions from the panel who have just looked at our material?
Yes, David, can I just ask you, children with guns, that's like a major no-no for any so-called human rights organization. So how come we don't have any criticism of any of the human rights groups? Here we have pictures, you have videos showing children being trained with guns, and yet the so-called human rights organizations remain silent.
They're very careful not to look so that they don't see them.
But it's even worse, Yoshua. It's even worse. Most people have given up. When Mr. Bernstein, who was the founder of the Human Rights Watch, he passed away recently, and he passed away in his 90s. He was approached with all this stuff, and he turned his position around when he saw what was going on. We say when you study the Talmud, and I studied Talmud with Yoshua 50 years ago. It's hard to believe it was 50 years ago, since I'm only 32. But what's unbelievable is there's an expression in Hebrew which goes, Im lo shoalim, ein meshivim. If you don't ask, you don't get answers. And that's why I learned that from Rabbi Hartman, someone I was learning with very closely at the time, together with Yoshua. If you don't ask, you don't get an answer. How many people that you know of have written to human rights groups and say, where are your voices? And what's very important, that there's a couple of reform rabbis very involved with the human rights work who have spoken to President Biden about exactly this issue. But that's because people got to them with this issue, right? Very important. And how many people does it take? Well, the truth is, I turned 70 half a year ago, and one of my friends working in Washington at the U.S. Congress also served 70, and he finally retired. I asked him, how do things work in a democratic country like the United States?
I'm 72. You mean that's happening to you too?
I don't know. Anyway, so I asked him the question, how do things work in Congress? He said, if we get 5 letters, someone who was a very high position in the U.S. Congress and a lay position, how do things go? He said, if we get 10 letters on any subject, 10, we go into a tizzy and have an emergency meeting. If 10 people watching this program tonight will contact each of their governments, I've been trying to get Canadians. Now, Canada, by the way, which is technically the chairman of something called the Refugee Working Group, the RWG, which is a dormant organization that's supposed to coordinate all the donations vis-a-vis UNRWA. And they cut off the funds back in 2019 to 2009 because of our report, which showed the UNRWA takeover. They put the funds back in when they got misinformation, disinformation, that the UNRWA was no longer in charge. I am looking for 10 courageous people in Canada to stand up and be counted, and to bring our films and our experts to the Canadian Parliament. For the last 6 years, we haven't found anyone willing to do that. To bring our experts to the Canadian Parliament, to show the films, to show our experts, and that's what we haven't had. Just to have our experts to come to the Canadian Parliament and say it's still as bad as it was then. But that's what it takes. It doesn't take thousands of people. It takes a few people with backbone to stand up and say, no, this can't be. And this is what we just saw last week. Last week, 2 congressmen organized another 80 congresspeople to turn to President Biden to say no funds for UNRWA until and unless they change their education system, et cetera, in the list of things I've just shown you. And it worked. That's what it takes. So when I'm invited by the Root and Branch Association, which I've known them since the day they began in 1981, when they asked me to come and make a presentation, I said, I have the feeling that you're going to get this out to the world in a proper fashion.
Okay.
So I put on the screen how people can help us out, but also on my website, IsraelBehindTheNews.com, you'll see our phone number. You'll see our email. You'll see everything so you can be in touch with us, because our work, which is privately supported, we've been doing this for 34 years without any government funding whatsoever, with the exception of the one grant we got in 2009 from the European Parliament to cover the Hamas elections, the elections where Hamas was elected. We've only done this with private support. And that's what I can just be very encouraging to you, that's the Alinsky way. The Alinsky way. And people want to have other projects. I have 10 projects waiting to be implemented. 10 projects waiting to be implemented, and it all can be done through private initiative, and basically you have to follow it through. I set this project up 34 years ago to last for a year, and then I would go back into social work practice. Well, I couldn't get back into it because there's too much to be done. That's what I can tell you.
No.
I would just like to add an anecdotal note about what David said, that all it takes is one good stone in the forehead to take out Goliath. I like to tell a joke about that, which is also true. I asked people, Palestinians, Philistines, I said, are Philistines mentioned in the Quran? Palestinians? It's a trick question, like, when did you last beat your wife? I said, yes. It said David killed Goliath and destroyed them. There's your reference to Palestine. I give them the surah, chapter, and verse. They don't know what to say. They wouldn't expect a Jew would know that. So yeah, one good stone in your jet. I mean, he had a couple, but all it took was one, bing, in the right place. So, some effective targeted killings. Again, the right information at the right time, or William telling the apple. I mean, there are always so many stories like that. So what David is saying is, it would seem to be common sense. Or even in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, you get one shot, turn off your computers, turn on your Jedi Force powers, boom. But there was a weakness in the Death Star, and the good guys knew where it was. But you have to hit it in the right place at the right time and then take it out. So yeah, this was also an issue in a previous discussion with the distinguished professor. Someone said, well, if we could devote 1% of our budget to Hasbara from the Israeli government, that would be $1 billion. And I said, $1 billion won't help you if it goes to $1 billion worth of people serving coffee, unnecessary staff, and wallpaper. I said, money isn't the problem. You have to have vision and a plan. William tells arrow and David sling and one stone. If you don't have that, every day in Israel, there's the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, a Ministry of Public Diplomacy, Shachrit, Mincha, and Mariv. There's another ministry, so another Knesset member can have a car, a driver, an office, an assistant director, a special salary and benefits to find a better way to schnorr. But this is what's called in philosophy or psychology the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. Like David said, we don't need words, we need action. The fallacy of misplaced concreteness means that, I'll give you an example for the 1960s. David knew my father. Johnson's Great Society program threw money at the ghettos, which is where he had his office in the El Barrio, the South Bronx. And my father said, all of a sudden, people he knew since 1952 from the Puerto Rican and Cuban communities, they weren't bad people. They'd never seen money like that. They didn't know what to do with it. So there was one nice abuela. I sat with her in an open pink Cadillac going down Fifth Avenue for the Puerto Rican Day Parade in 1960 at age 4. She wasn't a bad person. Well, she rented a room and she had all these gals typing away at typewriters. The money ran out so that the gals weren't fired anymore. And the room wasn't rented. It wasn't she was a bad person. She wasn't engaged in money laundering like Hunter Biden with Burisma or any of these other people where you give the money to their kids or you give them $50 million for a big book deal. That's called a bribe. Or $30 million to make a speech. That's called a bribe. Or you put someone on the board of a company, pay them $60,000 a month. They don't know anything about this. It's called a bribe. And then you have the money routed through your family members. So when your taxes are checked, everything's fine because they're not that dumb. So money is not the solution, is not the problem. Of course, you need a certain amount of money. But you need to know, I'm going to buy an arrow, or I'm going to buy for my sling a stone. And I know what I'm going to do with it. I know where the target is. If you don't know that, like you're taking out the Nazi heavy water production plant in Norway, and you maybe get one shot. So money is not the solution, and money is not the problem. And Israel doesn't need Hasbara. Someone said, yeah, we need Hasbara. That's the way a ghetto Jew talks. Hasbara means to explain. You need a blitzkrieg.
Well, we need 10 people outside the German consulate in New York saying 6 million was not enough for you?
Right, exactly like David says. Don't explain, storm the beaches. Anyway, I've said more than enough. I think again, remember that if someone says, are Palestinians mentioned in the Quran? Remember, I spent 3 years writing that 500-page research book. I said, yes, there's a reference to Palestinians in the Quran. David killed Goliath, cut off his head, and destroyed them. Any other questions? That shuts them up real fast. Now I'll refer everything back to the rest.
Allow me to finish this program with a short presentation of the man that UNRWA hired to be their representative to the youth. Please take a look. I'm sharing the screen.
Okay, David, it's not really going. Maybe you want to make just some comments because it is. I've seen the video, and I think it's he's a very popular musician. I think he won the Arab Idol or Palestinian Idol. David, if you could make some comments, maybe.
Yeah, just another 2 minutes on this program, please.
Lal, maybe you want to make a comment while we're waiting.
I would like to defer to Zorba the Jew, We're discussing training children to murder Jews. We have one participant who was born in a cave in Nazi occupied Greece and was saved because when the Wehrmacht squad came in and the commander saw Asher, who was a baby, this is Moses in the bulrushes, he said to his team, "That little baby Jewish boy looks like my son back in Hamburg." Sergeant Schultz in Hogan's Hero, "We see nothing, we hear nothing, we know nothing. We weren't here, they aren't here. Everyone in my squad, you saw us, nothing, you know nothing, you heard nothing, we're leaving, we're not coming back." Asher's life was saved. There's more stories after that for him his family getting him back. That's a whole nother story. But the issue of murdering Jews and Jewish children, or in this case, training children to murder Jews, is not the only one participating, I think, in this program who actually experienced being in the Shoah, saved from it, and then coming to God of Israel, Bless America, a number of years after the end of World War II, like our friend Larry Pfeffer, who came in,
It is a wonder what happens to a society, never mind to the participants directly, including pre-teens or maybe teenagers, when they are engulfed with this cult of death, that somehow it is Allah's verdict and wish for them to sacrifice, and in killing and risking going to heaven, they will find permanent salvation. It just boggles the mind. This is so antithetical to humanity, to human values, never mind to, of course, to Jewish values, primarily for us. Even if they were to cease tomorrow with new curricula, with new attitudes towards people who are different, accepting difference is such a big leap in the culture and in the education of anybody. I had to come to America to learn to accept that Greece was not that exceptional. So they have to come to that determination eventually in order to be able to live with themselves and to live with each other. Go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think the point is clear. Just what I ask is for your support to do what we're doing. We have everyone trying to stop us from doing what we're doing, and UNRWA issued a statement that we are terrorists, and that basically intimidated all Jewish organizations from working with us. But we have to overcome that. That's all.
I would like to add something at this point, which is lurking in the background, which I wish I didn't know about, but I do know about, and Asher knows about it through his encounter with the Greek Orthodox Church.
Right.
We are looking, and it's the elephant in the room that if we're not trained to see it, we could say it's not there, which is why it seems non-rational. Why would otherwise intelligent people say, well, I don't have time to look at it and not see it? There's a reason for that. And those in the Arab and Muslim world who hate Jews in Israel, and let's put on the side the philo-Judaic movements, they exist, Sheikh Palazzi, and they exist in Christianity. But again, with training people, you're dealing with a Western world that for 1900 centuries, since Christianity went from being a Jewish movement with a few Gentile members to a Gentile movement with a few Jewish members, and then became the state church of the Roman Empire about 330 CE. You're dealing with 1900 years. This is unprecedented in human history. 1,900 years of the mass murder, mass torture, and mass vilification of bluntly the Christ-killing kikes and deicide murdering gids of classical Christian theology in Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, and state Protestant lands. This goes into everything, the art, the music, the culture, the mythology, and that's not so easy to get out of people's system. And yes, it culminates in the Holocaust in the heart of Christian Europe. Until today, not one Nazi war criminal born Christian has ever been excommunicated, including ordained clerics, including Pastor Bieberstein, who was from the Evangelische Kirche Deutschlands and head of one of the Einsatzgruppen. Yeah, it's that bad. So then all of it, and it goes into the subconscious. I don't care if they're socialist, Marxist, progressive, liberal, they can call themselves whatever, the left wing, right wing, chicken wing. It's in the bones. It's in the subconscious. You're talk about propaganda and hasbara on that scale. So of course, then it becomes very rational. What's really at work? What's really at work is these people have been conditioned to regard this is something very hard for Jews to want to recognize. When you're dealing with people who have been conditioned theologically and culturally to regard your existence as an act of aggression, you have no right to self-defense because you have no right to exist. Your existence is an act of aggression. And I saw this when I wasted time being part of the Foreign Press Association for years. They always had to write, whatever the Arabs did, it was always a response to a Jewish action. Well, if you follow the chain of cause and effect, like to the first cause in scholastic theology, there's a first cause, God. The first cause for all of this is you exist, and you exist in the land of Israel. And this, if you go right to the bone, and many of the people aren't even conscious of it, is reflected in the response, non-response is the land of Israel, which has is the size of New Jersey with the population density of Singapore, is hit by 430 rockets a day. If you want to say divine, God created a situation, listen, before I zap you for what you did to the chosen people, and it's in the prophets, if one actually reads and want to take it seriously, I'm going to create a condition which is so obvious and so black and white that there's no way you can BS your way out of this. 430 rockets hit a sardine can filled with people, not just Jews. There are about 900 different ethnic and religious groups here, if you count the really small ones outside the Jewish community. For 10 days, I don't have to tell anyone what the response was. And then Israel hit back. But again, you don't have any right to exist. Now, again, for people who are not familiar with Christian theology, and Asher is with the Greek church, the normative position for these are the three major church groups, Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, and State Church Protestant, is replacement supersessionist theology, which follows the worst teachings of the church fathers about Jews, Judaism, and Israel. There are philo-Judaic traditions, but the worst ones are, and I unfortunately learned more about this than I care to, is you're the synagogue of Satan, you're the serpent's seed, your father is the devil, quote unquote, from the Greek Testament. Now, again, texts are only as good as the people who interpret that. Their people can interpret that differently, but that became the normative position. This is seen in church architecture with Jews suckling a pig, with images of Satan. A person would say, this has gone into the subconscious. They don't want you to know about that. They don't want to talk about that. And most of the interfaith dialogues are monologues, and all the nice talk is, as long as we don't have to compromise on any fundamental theological points, I'm okay, you're okay, everything's okay, and nothing is okay. And when there's trouble, we won't be there. We'll say, you did it. And this is what David is running into when I don't have time to look at it. Where is this coming from? That's where it's coming from.
Allow me to give an optimistic response. Who was the only diplomat for a period of 20 years to condemn, object to, and campaign against the new school books that was put out by the PA? Can you guess who that was?
Jean Kirkpatrick.
Nope. The only diplomat.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan?
No, he was already dead.
Okay.
But the only person representing a diplomatic entity to denounce the Palestinian Authority school system when it came out in 2001 until his death in 2011. He led the fight. His name was Archbishop Pietro Sambi, the papal nuncio, the representative of the Catholic Church in the Holy Land. And he did so at the order of Pope John Paul II, who gave him an order, and they have an organized religion, that any instance of anti-Semitism, he is to denounce. He went to every reporter possible to try to encourage them. Also, he found very few Jewish reporters willing to deal with it. And when he was handed the PLO state constitution, I was the only one who responded to him, and we translated it into English and into Hebrew. We published it in the Makor Rishon newspaper. He thanked me for that, and he became a close friend and someone that I very much admire. And basically, it's, I guess, man bites dog, or or whatever you want to call it, but that it was the Catholic Church that, according to the how should I say, under the directive of the Pope, decided this was wrong. And my teacher, someone I studied history with, was Arthur Hertzberg, who said that who studied the Pope's response during World War II when he was a cleric in Poland, saying that he did absolutely nothing to help the Jews. So this was his, in a sense, what we call tshuva, or repentance, for his lack of action in World War II. And he caused the Italian government to pull out of the Palestinian Authority and UNRWA school system, which they did.
Excuse me, which Pope are you talking about?
Pope John Paul II. Very important.
And wait a second.
But the nuncio came a little bit later than the Vatican II resolution that expunged the deicide from their catechism. That is something that the Greek Orthodox Church has not yet done. And this is annoying me.
I work on the basis of what we call the I factor, the integrity factor. That in every instance, you're going to be the same people with integrity. And what we saw of the courageous, outspoken Archbishop Pietro Sambi, who became a good friend. And by the way, when I came back from getting the school books, August 1st, 2000, and the Israeli government didn't want to look at them, I went into the foreign minister's office, and he more or less looked at it like I was looking at the New York telephone books. I got a phone call, a cell phone. Would I bring this to his office on the Mount of Olives, because he's seeing the Pope the next day? So I said, who am I to respond, to refuse a papal telephone request?
Papal telephone,
and had a very funny aspect to it. He says, I'm seeing you even though you hung up on me twice. I said, what are you talking about? He called my office. The Pope of the Vatican is looking for David Bedein. I hung up on him. What is this? And they called my home. And the Vatican is looking for David Bedein. What is this? Was my son in the army playing games with the phone? Hung up on him. So he said, I'm the only one to hang up on the Pope twice, on the Vatican twice, to still be received nicely. So all I can say is, with all the work that we do, we maintain a good sense of humor. We think that God is watching, and that God does have a sense of humor, and that somehow this is all going to work out. And after 50 years here, I'm putting out a new book, I'm now in the final stages, 50 encounters in 50 years of amazing people I've met, and give me encouragement, and give me a shpachta on the back. And
I have to add a footnote here, David, with no disrespect intended to your teacher, Professor Hertzberg. Pope John Paul II, when he was a young man in Poland, I'll add some facts that I know that perhaps your professor didn't. And then we run into the problem that in the world of world's leading experts, which is why Ben-Gurion told Truman, I am the prime minister of 2 million presidents, when Truman said, I am the president of 250 million Americans. I feel like I'm a nudist colony, because no one can ever admit they don't know anything. If I said today is Monday, it has to be, because can't lose space. Okay. When he was a young man, the reason that John Paul went into the priesthood is because he wanted to marry a Jewish girl in high school, and she didn't want to become Catholic, and he wasn't ready to become Jewish. And it was very much an Ivanhoe story. This is virtually unknown. And he said, well, if I can't marry her, I will join the priesthood. When he was a young man, he was quite a football player, an actor, a journalist. He was quite a guy in high school. He was involved in the Polish resistance. And a story the Vatican doesn't want told that I know from Sheikh Palazzi from Rome, from his sources, said John Paul found out that some Nazis were on the way to get some Jews and he killed them. But that didn't fit with their image of a man of peace. So the fact that I wouldn't expect Professor Hertzberg to know that, he was a young guy. The Vatican doesn't publicize these things because the ideas of, popes breaking Nazis' necks or smashing them over the head or slitting their throats doesn't fit, with the shoes of the fishermen. So, but your point, so it does surprise me that he told Sambi, this is what you're going to do. There have always been people throughout the history of the churches who did good things for Jews in Israel. That is not the issue. They exist. They always existed. There always a few. There always a 7,000 who don't bow the knees to Baal, as in Elisha's conversation with God after running away from Mount Carmel. It's the book of Kings, chapter 1, verse 18 and 19. They always exist. But in terms of the general policy for which this is the exception, and there was the bishop who told the Christian family that saved Asher, you have to give him back to his parents. You can't raise him as parents were dead, the people who adopted him were planning to say, you have a new name, Aristotle or something, and not even tell him about his parents at all. And then the local priest or bishop, you can't do that. They're his parents. Yes, we know about that. And that's good. And yeah, you're right. We want to look for people of integrity. They do exist. However, in terms of the general mindset of Christian Europe, in terms of psychology and psychiatry and education, go try to reverse 1900 years of teaching, which gets into your bones, your soul, everything. Having said that, that is where I think is the source of, there's not just money and oil, and they're afraid of being attacked themselves, which is legitimate. It's right in the bones, and it's been there for 1,900 years. Now, Les, why don't I hand this over to you and Yoshua and Asher for your final comments or questions before we conclude.
I have to unfortunately take a bus. So please allow me to leave right now. I'm sorry, but I'm dependent on the Egged bus to get me home.
Wonderful. David, I just want to thank you on behalf of all of us for a phenomenal presentation. And we really hope that people will be watching this, and we know they will, and that they will give a hand and they will, they will act. Let's do the ultimate chutzpah. Let's walk the walk instead of
I'm ultimate chutzpah. I have to raise $150,000 to produce a film in 10 days. I don't have any money to do it. Right. And somehow this is going to work out because it has to work out.
David, we believe in Israel's a land of miracles. And I think it was Glassman that said, we believe in miracles, but we work very hard to make them happen. So Bezrat Hashem, they should happen. All the very best, and we want to thank you very much, David. God bless.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.